Hello everyone, welcome back to Threes to Wound. My name's Reese and today we've got another exciting tactical battle report between two old foes. Thanks for joining me once again. Excuse the voice, the look. I think the green's very appropriate. I've had the dreaded COVID, Nurgle's kiss, spicy cough, whatever you want to call it. It's been a little bit of a trial and tribulation getting through it, but we're on the up and very happy to be bringing you another tactical battle report today. I was lucky enough to have recorded this one a couple of weeks before I got sick, so that's a win, and I didn't give it to my friends, so that's another win as well. We're going to be running the new Chaos Legionaries versus the Grey Knights. So, you know, a bit of Chaos versus Imperium magic going on here. And I'm really excited to play this game because it's two quite elite teams. Two teams with 6 models each. These are the new brave world of Grey Knights with 6 models, which I think is really, really good, really exciting. I like the Grey Knights. I can't wait to get Chaos on the table and test them out. And for me in the editing room, armies with 6 models is fantastic. It makes my life a lot easier. We won't waste too much time. Let's just jump into the game and we'll work it out as we go. Oh, before we do, if I say anything weird or it's a bit rough with the voiceover, sorry, COVID brain is a thing apparently. Today's mission was mission 2.2, Saboteurs. A fun mission where there's one key structure that's set up in the defender zone that you've got to get your operatives to as the attacker and blow it up. A bit of an interesting twist that this mission's got is there is what's called a ruse, or there has been a ruse committed, which is basically after the defenders selected their kill team, they've got to divide them into 2 forces, equal as close as possible in those 2 forces as well, equal amount of models, and then the attacker actually gets to select one of those forces that's been lured away by you guessed it, a ruse. Those operatives don't start in the battle zone and they arrive later on. The second part to that is, well, it's a decoy, return to base. Obviously those that have been rused have worked it out and come back, and you've actually got a roll to have those operatives come back in, so there is an element of risk involved with them not coming back, and it's on a 4+, so 50-50 chance that they're going to come back, and there's obviously some deployment restrictions. Must be within the deployment zone, they've got to be within blue square of one of the board edges in that deployment zone, and must be more than triangle away from enemy operatives. For the attacker, the way that they do blow the structure up is they spend 1 AP on plant explosives. So this basically means they perform that action when they're within triangle of the actual installation they're attacking, and they can't use that if they're within engagement range of an enemy, and each time they do that, it takes off 1 damage point from the structure. If they manage to get on top, they get to take off an extra 1 on top, so taking away 2 damage instead of the 1. Another thing to note, if an operative performs that action, until the end of the turning point, they can't charge or perform a shoot, so I guess you can't get up to the installation and then stay active in the rest of the phase. It must be after any of the types of actions like that have already been performed, or before you perform any like that. There's some mission-specific equipment here as well. The attackers can take melter charges, which give them an additional damage that they can do when they attack the installation. While the defenders can take the emergency Vox, this for 1 equipment point lets them add 1 to their dice roll, so a much better chance for them to return from turning point 2 onwards. There's a little table that shows you how much damage can be dealt to the structure and how that affects the victory points here. So if there's no damage done to the structure, the defender scores all 12 victory points. If it's 1 to 3, the attacker gets 4, defender gets 8, 4 to 6, 8 to the attacker, 4 to the defender, and if it's 7+ damage done to the structure, 12 victory points to the attacker. This is obviously an interesting one, having just that main major point of attack, that one building that we're going to be attacking or defending. So having played this mission once before, I was overrun really, really quickly. So if I do end up playing the defender in this, I will be putting every possible body in front of that objective to stop anyone getting through. Especially in this game, it's not about your operative surviving, it's just about making sure your enemy can't get their objective, they can't score victory points. Let's look at the units I chose to take in my kill team today. Being that it's the Legionary kill team, there's only 6 operatives in the team. First off was to choose my leader, and for this I went the Legionary Chosen, mainly because it was a new option and I was really interested to see what he could do. Taking the plasma pistol was a no-brainer. Every chance you get, cram plasma into your list. You're never ever going to go too far wrong with plasma. With the Demon Blade, it's 5 attacks, hitting on 2s, 4-7, lethal 5+. I love that 7 damage on the criticals. You know, one-shotting guardsmen and stuff like that is always an extra benefit, but also able to put out a huge amount of damage into the Grey Knights. The Chosen's also got a whole bunch of new rules that we haven't really seen before, so I'm really looking forward to seeing some of those. First off, Favoured of the Dark Gods. Once per turning point, when you want to use a strategic ploy, you can use one for no CP as long as it shares the same mark as your leader or the operative choosing to do that. So there's also things like the Icon Bearer can carry this, the Aspiring Champion as well. So there's more than one model that can have this rule. Also got Daemonic Aura, which basically means that anytime an operative wants to fall back within range of this unit, they lose some of the distance they can fall back. So a good way to keep units entrapped. I don't think this will come up too much with the Grey Knights. I think they're just here to punch on. And there's also Soul Feast, which means every time you fight in combat, if any of those strikes inflict critical damage, you also gain 2 wounds back. So really, really handy for keeping a close combat operative alive. Next up, it's the Legionary Balefire Acolyte, and I'm really excited to see this guy in action. I think this is one of the coolest models from this new team. Obviously got a range of psychic powers that he can manifest. So not only does he have the ability to be an offensive weapon with those spells, but he can also be a buffing unit as well, so he can look after his teammates. He's also got Demonic Energies, which means if he does get stuck in close combat, he's actually got a way to get back some wounds in there as well. So not what I want for him, but with how this mission's going of my units having to push up and get amongst that objective, it may come up. The Legionary Butcher is one of the units that I'm really looking forward to seeing, but I'm also a bit on the fence as whether or not he's going to be as effective as I hope, especially against Grey Knights. Having things like the Reap is really good, but we're up against a smaller amount of models in this team, so it may not come up. But the high amount of damage he can do, but very excited to see how much damage he can output, especially on the charge. All the special rules that he's got are definitely equipped to maximizing him on the attack. Just got to make sure he doesn't get bogged down. The Legionary Shrive Talon has made the cut, and this guy looks really cool model, by the way, but I also think he's going to be one of the more powerful close combat operatives in this list, which basically means if he gets attacked or charged, that he still gets to go first. So I think that's a really, really powerful ability here. The Horrifying Dismemberment, things like that, the Grisly Marks, those unique actions, I'm interested to see how they play. They sound cool, but I'm wondering if they come into it anything more than thematically. The Legionary Anointed is here. I'm excited about him. As Ben from Battle Brothers Tabletop says, Control Alt Demon when all else fails. I'm just looking forward to getting this guy into demon mode, into close combat. He's not really here to do the objective. That's not my plan. That's not what I want for this guy. I just want him to get in there and wreck some face. The last guy onto the list is the Legionary Gunner, probably the least exciting thematically of the guys, but I just think plasma guns in this game are too good and too powerful to leave home without one. It's also good to have someone probably sitting a little bit more in the back line of the board, just keeping an eye over all these close combat monsters. It does hurt to have someone with a little bit of utility, also someone you can charge up later in the game to grab the objective if needed. I kept my Chaos Blessings really simple for this team. Everyone is Khorne except for the Plasma Gunner and the Sorcerer. They've both gone Zench. So basically, I'm wanting to take as much advantage as I can of that close combat punch-on fest that it's going to be around that objective. So I'm very aware that's what I'm all about. I don't need to necessarily be too survivable. The only other one I did think about was possibly Slanesh, just for the extra maneuverability. Having that little bit of extra distance in that first turn, second turn, could come up trumps, but I thought, you know what, I also do want to kill some units. As far as equipment goes, I kept it pretty simple. I gave my leader operative the Grizzly Trophy. I really like this one. Anything that takes away attacks from units, especially the Grey Knights with their lethal 5-up, I think that's pretty handy. I then gave the Malefic Blade to the Plasma Gunner in case he does have to run up the board towards the end of the game. It helps to give him a little bit more close combat punch. Malign Scripture I think is definitely an auto take as well for the Sorcerer. I just think anything you can do that's going to get him firing out those spells as often as possible is always really good. I then also gave 3 Melter Bombs to my main attacking units. So the Anointed, the Butcher, and the Shrive Talon all had the Melter Bombs for this as well, because they're the units I'm thinking are going to get close to that objective. For the Grey Knights, this was the first time I'd seen them now with the extra operative that had been added into their list. I already like the Grey Knights. I think out of the Space Marine teams, they're already one of the stronger ones. Them and Deathwatch, I think, are the pretty good teams. My opponent's played a few games with them now, and he's definitely made the smart choice, I think, to get rid of the Gunner operative. As cool as it is to have the gunner in the team, they're not really necessary. The weapons you get and having that heavy restriction when compared to the Storm Bolters with Relentless, I think weight of fire is definitely the way to go for the Grey Knights. So we're looking at 5 of the Grey Knights, all with their Storm Bolters, and they've also got the Nemesis Force weapons, so lethal 5 up on that. A really strong combination. I'm a fan of either the Force weapons. The Falchions are still really cool in my mind as well too. Having Relentless on your close combat weapons and Relentless on your Storm Bolters is pretty scary. But that extra damage you do get from the lethal 5 up is definitely handy, especially against teams that have a few more wounds. They've also got the Justicar in there, well, because they have to, and he's equipped the same. He's just got the Storm Bolter and the Nemesis Force weapon. For the equipment, he's put Psybolt on one of the guys, effectively turning into his gunner operative, getting the extra 1 to the damage characteristics for the battle. The rest of his points went on putting the emergency Vox on all of his operatives. He really wasn't leaving it to chance that his guys weren't going to make it on the battlefield. I think this is a smart choice. I mean, there's obviously, good stuff you can get with those extra equipment points, but at the end of the day, if those operatives aren't on the board, well, they can't do much anyway. For the TAC Ops today, I went with Seek and Destroy because it seemed very, very appropriate. I dealt them out, and the cards I got today was Headhunter. Hopefully one that should be relatively easy to get, as the Justicar is going to be putting himself in harm's way, trying to stop me blowing up the objective. Next up was Rout, another great one, not just because it sounds like Root, but because the enemy operatives are all going to be staying within their deployment zone trying to defend the objective. So another really good one to stack with Headhunter. Lastly, I took one of the Legionary specific ones with Dark Desecration. Basically, you have to select a terrain feature with the heavy trait, and then it's all about killing operatives within triangle of that to score victory points. So obviously, I just checked the objective. I was going to be blowing up anyway. We rolled off to see who would be the attacker and the defender, and the Grey Knights have ended up as the defender for this game. As such, once we'd picked the forces, the Grey Knight commander had to split his forces, and I had the tough decision of picking which one was going to go and be rused and who was going to start on the battlefield. Luckily for him, there's not a huge difference of the 2 kill teams he had. The main difference being that one had the Psybolt ammunition, the other group had the one with the Justicar in it. I made the decision to go with the Justicar group being the one that was gonna stay. Thematically makes sense, as if they're gonna outwit the leader and he's gonna go traipsing off into the wilderness. But also, I didn't want that Grey Knight with that Psybolt ammunition starting up on a vantage point and putting some fire on me in the first turn. The last thing we had to do before the models could go on the board was put down the barricades. For myself, I chose to put mine at the far edges of the battlefield. The one down the bottom was probably the only one that was going to come into play. I just did that in case I needed to move a little bit further around on that flank area, and it was a little bit of no man's land there. The other one was just to keep it out of the way. My opponent proceeded to build the Great Wall of China through the center of the battlefield there, pretty much clogging those 2 gaps through the terrain with his barricades, making it very annoying and making it going to be a time-consuming process to get through there. Deployment was a relatively short affair, as there really was only a total of 9 models that needed to be put down with both teams combined. The Grey Knights started by putting their Justicar and one of their operatives directly behind the main objective, ready to defend it with their lives. The other operative he put up on the vantage point where he could see most of the battlefield was going to be able to get some fire on my operatives right from the get-go. For me, I had the advantage. I get to counter deploy here, so I had a little bit of a look around the battlefield and was trying to, make the Grey Knights hedge their bets or pick their poison in terms of who they were going to shoot at. I put my leader at the far side of the board. My plan with him was to get him to run forward and actually climb over that terrain ahead of him and then sort of attack the objective from the side. Having the plasma pistol and being a bit of a close combat boss, I knew he was going to be a bit of a nuisance there. He was vulnerable to getting shot, and having that operative up on the vantage point, could already see him. There was no point putting him in conceal, so I just started him in engage straight away. The Butcher, the Shrive Talon, and the Anointed, I put all behind the light terrain there. Had the same theory in mind as well. I think he was going to have to shoot at someone. I was going to take some fire, so I didn't shy away from it. I put them as far forward as I could, where they'd only have to traverse that one piece of terrain, hopefully gain some cover if they were shot at, but then they'd just be able to push up the board straight away. The last 2 were my aces in the hole, my sneaky Zench boys. I hid them behind that heavy terrain at the end there. Obviously, there's a great vantage point there where I knew I was going to be able to pop my plasma gunner up to return some fire. And with the Balefire, he was either going to be able to do the same, jump up and cast some spells and doom from up there, or if needed, push up to support the other operatives. Into the scouting phase, and the Legionnaires, we decided to go with the free dash, while the Grey Knights took the change order, hoping to use that on their guy on the vantage point so he could go from conceal to shoot, to make sure he could punish those Chaos guys creeping up towards the objective. This meant the Grey Knights had the initiative. I wasn't too worried about this, as they only had the 3 models on the board, so they were going to be in Overwatch before we knew it. It didn't really affect the game for me too much. We headed into Turning Point 1 initiative phase, and the Grey Knights declared their first TAC op, which was challenge. So basically they selected one of their Grey Knight operatives to challenge my leader to a duel. How very foolish. They also spent 1 CP on Bolter Discipline, hoping to get that sniper up on the vantage point, the maximum amount of impact into the game. And who would have thought it? That was the first thing the Grey Knight started with. They selected the Grey Knight on the vantage point and decided to shoot at my Chosen, which was, I guess, a pretty good option. After the dust had settled and he'd fired twice at my Chosen leader, he remained alive but on 1 wound. Not the best start. I knew I was going to take some fire right from the get-go, but geez, having him down to 1 wound definitely hurts a lot. The Grey Knight Commander did slip up a little bit here. He was going to cast Armored Resilience, but actually forgot until much later in the turn. We'll see if that comes back to bite him. In response to eating so many bolter rounds, the leader bravely limped across the battlefield to get into as much cover as he could to hide from that vantage point. With just the 1 wound, I guess he was effectively no longer a close combat threat, because within 1 hit he was going to die, and especially against Grey Knights, he wasn't going to be able to one-shot anyone. So my plan here was to push him to that far side of the battlefield and basically use his plasma pistol as a bit of a deterrent or distraction for my opponent. Originally I was going to climb up over the terrain, but that was really no longer viable with that reduced movement. So we're pushing him to that side of the battlefield. My opponent was going to have to work really, really hard to take him out, and if they didn't, late game he might be able to sneak in and blow someone up. The Grey Knight Commander, seeing this, decided he really wanted the victory points for Headhunter, and having a plasma gun running around your backlines a little bit later on was too much of a risk to allow. So he sent one of his Grey Knights bounding over towards the Chosen leader to finish him off next turn. It is a risky move, as it takes one of the 3 defenders away from that main objective, but also I guess there is a lot of victory points up for grabs with that 1 unit. The Plasma Gunner, who'd been waiting for his moment to show that just because he doesn't have any cool special rules like the rest of the team, can still contribute to the best of his ability. He climbed up onto the vantage point opposite the Grey Knight, who was on the vantage point on the opposite side of the battlefield. I, of course, as always, overcharged the plasma and fired away, and proceeded to roll one of the most disgusting rolls the world has ever seen. He rolled 3 6s and a 5, which of course with the marker Zench gets turned into a critical. So that was 4 critical hits on that poor unfortunate Grey Knight. So it does turn out that him forgetting to cast Armored Resilience on that guy didn't really matter too much. The Grey Knight Justicar, seeing his teammate torched so horrendously, decided the most, conservative and smartest approach here was to head into cover so he could get into some close combat shenanigans in the next turn with the attackers. The rest of the Chaos team, upon seeing the cowardly Justicar fleeing into cover, this emboldened them, and they all surged forwards, ready to get the hurt on the objective in the next turn. The Grey Knights had gone into Overwatch, but there was no valid target, so I was able to move the whole team up in one piece. Because of the success of the Plasma Gun too, I did decide with the Balefire Acolyte I wasn't going to leave him hanging back. I pushed him up as well. At the end of Turning Point 1, the scores remain locked at 0-0. Not a bad first turn for the Chaos guys. Having the leader cop so much fire early definitely wasn't part of the plan. I knew someone was going to take some damage, but definitely not that much. Apart from that, everything else went according to plan. I was able to get rid of the sniper off that vantage point, so I guess I've got a bit of battlefield superiority here as well, which is great. And everyone's pushed up to the objective, so I'm going to be able to get a lot of bombs on the middle there straight away. Turning Point 2 was kicking off, and the first thing we had to do was roll for the reinforcements who were going to be no longer rused. I think I'm using that the right way. The Grey Knight Commander rolled for both, and unfortunately he failed too, which was really unfortunate considering he had spent the extra equipment points as well to get those guys in, or at least increase their chance to be able to get in straight away. The one Grey Knight who does arrive in good news was the one who had the Cybolt ammunition, so effectively, a heavy bolter light. He positioned himself under the heavy terrain there, ready to climb up and open fire on the rest of the battlefield or shift across the objective as needed. We rolled off for initiative. The Legionnaires took out this one. and then we moved into the initiative phase. I revealed route because I think things were about to get very serious around that objective, and there was definitely going to be some bodies hitting the floor. The Grey Knights again went with Bolter Discipline, hoping to continue their strong shooting start, and I spent 1 CP on Blood for the Blood God, wanting to increase the carnage as I charged into close combat. This is what I'd been waiting for, the chance to use these super cool close combat models and get him in there and cut off some face. So I got the Shrive Talon and charged him straight into the waiting Justicar, hoping to wipe him out straight away, and that would basically get rid of most of the defenders, or all the defenders, away from the objective. I'm pretty sure he also was really keen to charge just because he wanted to wear the Justicar's skin as a coat, but maybe this keenness to get that skin coat is what cost him, because the Justicar promptly crushed him. Lethal 5 up with power swords, hitting on 2 up. You don't need any fancy character rules when you're hitting that consistently and doing that much damage. You just wreck face. The only positive that came out of it, apart from losing that great operative from me, was that the Justicar was taken down to 2 wounds. The newly arrived Grey Knight, wanting to get involved straight away, clambered up the terrain, kicked the ashes of his fallen brother out of the way, and targeted the plasma for vengeance. He opened fire twice, and even with the boost to his damage, he only takes off 9 wounds, leaving himself now in the open for vengeance from the guy he was trying to get vengeance on. What a twist. The Butcher, sensing his time was now, took this moment to charge in the Justicar and do some said butchery. Once he dispatched his foe, he thought he may as well place a Melter charge on the objective, taking off the first 2 points of damage off the structure. Who says he doesn't think? Killing the Justicar was also great because it netted me 2 victory points for Headhunter and 1 victory point for Rout. The Grey Knight commander needed to get some points on the board, so he quickly moved his warrior over to finish up the leader, and this gave him a huge 4 victory points, 2 for challenge and 2 for Headhunter. Now I find it harder to say it was a bad idea for him to move out of position, but he is now on the other side of the battlefield. He did have the one idea to stay involved in the battle, and he looked back towards that objective and fired at the Butcher, who was now stuck out in the open, no longer engaged in close combat, and plinked off a few wounds. The Plasma Gunner, still smouldering from the barrage of fire he had sustained and quite surprised he was alive, turned around and continued his great shooting form and took his vengeance on the vengeance-seeking revenge Grey Knight. He killed the Grey Knight on the vantage point. The Grey Knights were running real low on models really quickly, so they were already into Overwatch. The Grey Knight, who'd just killed the leader, pivoted and fired at the Butcher, and with a hail of relentless fire, brought him down to 6 wounds. The Anointed took this opportunity while the Butcher was getting shot to move up to the objective and place a Melter Bomb for another 2 damage, bring the total damage to 4, taking it to its middle bracket. There was no one left in line of sight for the Overwatch for the Legionaries, and by that I mean, well, they didn't have anyone left really to shoot. The Balefire Acolyte, trying to find a way to get involved in the game, just moved forward towards the main objective, keeping a watchful eye out for any incoming reinforcements. At the end of the turn, it's 3 victory points to 4 in favour of the Grey Knights, but the objective was already looking very shaky. This was a great turn 2, especially with this mission. I do still feel this mission is definitely heavily slanted in the attacker's favourite, especially against teams that do have such a low model count. You can see with the Grey Knights arriving piecemeal, I've already taken out 3 of their operatives. They've got 1 left on the battlefield with 2 to come in. So by the time those guys arrive, it might be too little too late. There's not much I need to do, short of keep the pressure on and get that objective blown up as quick as possible. At top of turning point 3, nice and easy, all the Grey Knights finally return from being effectively rused, and they surround the objective, making sure they can get maximum firepower onto the guys huddled around it. The Grey Knights gained back the initiative, and this was pretty crucial for them staying in the game. They also used Bolter Discipline for 1 CP. The Grey Knights kicked off with their big time point scorer of the last turn, storming back towards the objective and giving himself a clear line of sight on the heretics surrounding the objective. He was hoping to use Bolter Discipline and Relentless to maximum effect. He fired on the wounded Butcher, hoping to finish him off. Unluckily for him, some bad rolling by the Knight and good rolling by the Butcher meant that on the first round of fire, only a critical went through. So now the Grey Knight had to spend his second salvo on the Butcher to finish him off. If that first round of fire had killed the Butcher, he then could have targeted the Anointed next, and if he could have finished him off, well then the game would have been wide open again. But now, having the Anointed waiting there for his next activation really puts the game in dire straits. And the Anointed, well, he didn't waste any time. He was actually able to scale the objective, place one of his melter bombs up there, and by blowing it up from the vantage point, he actually gets an extra point of damage. So it ends up him doing 3 points of damage, taking it over the 7-point threshold. As simple as that, the Chaos Legionaries had just stormed in, wrecked the joint, and were out. Both myself and the Grey Knights General were a little bit dumbfounded. We didn't know what to do. I was happy to continue on with the mission and go for Pride, but the fact that he'd lost those 12 victory points, there was really no way that he could win. He could definitely get back a little bit of street cred or pride by seeing how many of his secondaries he'd got, but he'd already scored 4 points, so the maximum he could get on the secondaries was another 2, so it was looking pretty unlikely. So a gentleman's agreement was made that we'd end the game, we'd set up the table, and we'd play another round. Let's head back to me in the studio for the wrap-up. Thanks to me down on the battlefield there. Welcome back to the studio. Yeah, an interesting game with a bit of a weird ending. It felt like it went from just getting interesting to all of a sudden it was all over. I'd played that mission before against another friend. I was playing the Craft Worlds. He was playing Intercessor Marines, and they absolutely romped it because a little bit similar. I hadn't really set up a bit of a wall to stop the opposition getting straight in that objective, and they just walked in. It's one of those few missions that I've seen really that all of the points are scored purely by blowing up or destroying or holding just one objective. So it does mean that you have to change your brains or your mindset a little bit towards that all-out defense, that there is really nothing else that matters as a defender as that point. In the Grey Knight defenders, defense, my good friend James, I still think he did some good plays. I still think their Headhunter and Challenge worked really well. 4 victory points in 1 kill against a model he knew I was going to set up. It probably was maybe worth waiting 1 to 2 turns more. He knew that model was going to come to him, and he may not have to do, I guess, that big sacrifice of sending that model away to chase down the leader. The leader was always going to come to him, and then that did hurt him because there was only the Justicar actually on the objective. He also got really unlucky. Usually, shooting with Stormbolters with Relentless is super reliable. That Butcher took 4 rounds of shooting to die in the end when you think about it. He got shot at once in the turn, he then got overwatched, and then he took the next turn another 2 rounds of Bolter Fire to get finished off. So I think that really hurt the Grey Knight Commander, and there's nothing he could do about that apart from the fact that it's a dice game. If I had have rolled worse for my armor saves, that could have been very different. He could have potentially killed him in round 2, and then that Butcher was no longer an issue in round 3, and he wouldn't have had to have spent any bullets on that. He could have been putting all of his rounds into the Anointed. The other thing he probably could have thought about as well was, did he need to shoot the leader in the first turn, or would those bullets have been better spent on one of the other 3 units who had the melter bombs? I'm not saying that the leader's definitely not a worthwhile target, but being that he was at the far side of the battlefield and it was going to take him the longest to get to the objective, it was a little bit of a ruse. See what I did there? To make that leader look like a juicy target out there, isolated and alone. I'm not saying it was a genius move, but it definitely worked out for me in the sense that that became a too good a target to shoot at versus the other guys who were really more important. As the commander of Team Chaos, it was a little bit disappointing the way this mission went, and it didn't really get me the opportunity that I wanted to showcase how good these guys can be. I'm not saying they're a top tier team, but after playing a couple more games with them since, I definitely feel like they are a good, strong mid-tier team, and you can have a lot of fun. They're very, very thematic, and they're hugely powerful. I also think if you use the marks correctly in the builds, and I'm wanting to try this out a little bit more, yes, they're an awesome close combat army, but I think with the right build they can be a really effective shooting army as well. As for the next battle report, it will be the first one to feature the Warp Coven team that I've been working on with Ben from Battle Brothers Tabletop. So in my next episode, I guess, will reveal that team, and then I'll have a chance to get them on the battlefield and see what they can do. I'm really excited about seeing all the different bits and pieces they've got and picking the team and seeing how they perform. If you are following along, make sure you keep tagging us on Instagram and sending, even on Ben's new Discord, Battle Brothers Tabletop, there is a Discord for him now. So if you haven't checked that out, make sure you do. There's a whole lot of really, really awesome kill team chatter going on. There's a channel just for the challenge as well. I'm terrible on there. Apologies if you are on there. I'm usually just lurking because I'm reading the time zone after you guys, because you all talk while I'm asleep, and then I just have to catch up the next day. So sorry I'm not that vocal in there, but no, I'm lurking like a creep, reading everything. Make sure to join the fun, join the family. Make sure you subscribe and like this video as well. And I really want to hear your comments as well. What are the other teams you want to see getting on the battlefield? I've just finished painting the Chalnath terrain, finally. They only had to bring up another box set before I got that done. But I finally painted that up, so I'm going to be doing a few more of the Chalnath missions. But what are the teams you'd like to see on that battlefield? I love hearing which teams you're excited about seeing. I've now got the Corsairs to paint up. I've still got my Pathfinders to paint up. I've got the Novitiates to paint up. They've all been assembled. They just need to be painted. I also did a poll as well for how I should paint the new models I've got for the Chaos team as well. So who do you reckon, Night Lords or Alpha Legion? That poll's on my page as well. As always, guys, really appreciate you watching. Thank you so much for all the support, and we'll see you next time.